For sure.
Speaking of
I'm curious if I can interject. What are some of the reasons? We've got several people watching. What are some of the reasons that some of you have joined? Maybe we can chat about that as well.
Yeah.
As you continue.
Because this is a social experience, maybe even a social experiment.
We're going to get to that, Gary.
Yeah, we are going to get to that, Devil Dog. We're starting to have some questions here too. So I don't know if I really thought through how we're going to do stuff from chat. But what do you think, Jimmy?
I can compile them if since I'm the secretary probably of this group apparently.
If you feed some of them up, maybe I can ask the ones. I mean,
technical expert,
exactly. So the point of tonight's session 0 is to discuss session 0. For us, it's all of us coming together over the last year at various conventions and online and figuring out what it is that we could all bring to a show like this, and we'll see if that proves true in the long run. But session 0 just seems really important because that is where you set expectations. That is where you discuss the parameters and the boundaries. And as boundless as some of these games can get, for me, the interesting part is when you run up against obstacles or you come against the edges of what's going on. So I think that, like, for me, we just call this game prep. I mean, what was everybody else's experience early on? So I'll just start with mine really quick. I had a GM back in 1982. He did all the work. We went to his house. He printed the characters. He made the characters.
That was high school for you, right?
It was high school for me. That was my freshman year. And that he wasn't my first GM. But he was the one who basically said, "It's my game. I'm running it. We're playing, I believe it was Slave Lords. I think we were playing the A1 through 4 Slave Lords." He did everything. We just had to show up. He also was a fella who enjoyed a drink. So the end of the game could get a little weird sometimes with experience points and so forth. But early on, they were all really good. But he controlled everything. There was no setting of expectations, nothing like that. We just went room to room and we encountered things. Mostly we killed things. Sometimes we talked with people, but only if the module said the pixie will talk with the group. So for us, there was no session 0 way back when I started. Later, we did more of that. What about the rest of you? I guess let's start with Matt.
I didn't even comprehend the idea of session 0 until it's been very recent. I mean, within the last 24 months, probably 2 years, 3 years, maybe. Any of my session 0 was my prep for my game, like you just said, like that. Like I was that guy that this is the game that I'm running, and you guys can bring your characters, and that was pretty much it. So up until just a couple years ago, I didn't do anything for session 0. After hearing the idea, we have now, I mean, we spend, my regular group that meets every other Friday, we spend quite a bit of time in character development, making sure that, hey, even mixing in the backstories, making sure that the characters are all going to gel well together. We had the most recent campaign that we're doing for Pathfinder, actually. It's pretty funny because the DM, which is not me, says, "Hey, I want you to all develop your characters in secret and see what we come up with." And I mean, it was like, it blew everybody's mind. And we had been doing that. It's like we got into this role of doing that session 0 and getting all the characters to mesh well together and have this huge backstory before we even started. And then the guy says, "Hey, we're going to go back to the old days where there's no synergy." And it was like, oh my God. How do you operate that way?
Yeah. What about you? What about you, Brian? What do you when you run or when you play? Either one?
You know what I like to do? I like to develop like secret Facebook groups. I throw all my players into a group, and then I kind of give them a breakdown and ask some questions about what kind of game that they're looking for. And I actually don't run session 0 face to face. I generally do it online. And I can kind of gauge everyone's interests, give them all my feedback, and it's a slow kind of process where we We burn through questions and talk about what everyone wants. And then eventually I can herd all the cats into one particular area that is a game that I also want to run. And then we can get together, make characters, and maybe even play half a session that's mostly, theme and feeling and just kind of getting your feet wet.
That's interesting. So CA Wright was actually saying that they use Session Zero to figure out what system they're going to play. That's an interesting idea. Yeah.
That is a baller move. Well, but that also speaks to a group that knows and appreciates the fact that the core idea of role playing is universal, and whatever, like, to me, system is like a flavor that you put onto your, like, I guess, performance, storytelling, or reactions, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
What about you, Jimmy?
Session Zeros for me became crucial when I say that at the very beginning of the channel, because it was a way for me to get to actually know the players to some degree. And the last game I haven't really done it on, but the first 3 games that started up for me within inside a week, when I opened up the channel, I had everybody emailing me backstories, and then we ran a Session Zero, because it also then helped learn the virtual tabletop and Fantasy Grounds and getting some of that out of the way. So,
Sure.
Now, did y'all, hold on, I hate to interrupt. Did we hear the growl on the channel now? Because it is loud as hell in my ears. Y'all are going to hear it. Y'all
I don't
are
have
hear
the
it
channel up.
Zoom. Yeah, okay.
I don't have the channel up.
Okay, so there's.
I see the teeth though. I see the mouth. That's
yeah,
fantastic.
so that's showing that's showing up. So that's Davenport. Dave Import. Okay.
Dave Import.
Dave Import. And he's our mimic.
Apparently it was very loud, judging by the chat.
Yeah. So it was loud. So I'll bring that down a little bit more. I figured it out, and I was dealing with Brian. Anyway, so Session Zeros have been definitely more advantageous on the virtual side, because now you get 2 birds with 1 stone. You get the players to learn, and then learn this system.
That's interesting, because you do most of your gaming right now on your stream. So you mentioned getting to know your players. So that's pretty significant distinction if you think about it. When I'm talking about Session Zero, I almost always I'm talking about the guys I've been playing with for 25 years. That's a good point. When you're talking about your Session Zero, getting to know your players is also a big piece of that.
Crucial.
Well, what's crazy is that the 4 of us, I suspect that the way we play games, run games, is very, very different. And I think that's a crucial element, because despite the fact that we're all on the same, little channel here, we're running totally different things.
Oh, yeah.
And so everyone loves something different. We all have our own way to do things, and nobody is wrong. Well, Jimmy's wrong, but
my goal is not to kill everybody, so we're distinctly different in that regard.
I want to kill.
Okay. Yeah. This kind of shit talking. Hey, fans out there, this kind of shit talking will go on all the time. So just don't feel bad if you also want to do a little bit of it in chat. I was.
Devil Dog's calling you out. He never got us.
That's scary. He's always going to call me out. So he's
keep you honest.
Yes.
I think you should drink every time somebody calls you out. That's probably what it. Yeah.
I think that probably is. Wasn't that in the bylaws? I was pretty sure.
I think yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I was just going to say that for me,
I see a TPK reference.
I always had the conceit in my game that it wasn't just my story. Like I often describe GMing as backing away from the players cautiously, while keeping your arms out so you can kind of keep them in the story, but you're not restricting them. You're just trying to lay down enough pavement that they keep having a place to run into. And a lot of that, like my game just recently, now just last week, we finally reached the tipping point at 7th level 3.5 D&D, where the story is now theirs. They've done so many things that they've written most of their own story now. So I'm now really just fading into the background and guiding it. So in order to get there relatively quickly and not take like till 15th level or whatever it might be, I use a book from Judges Guild from like 1981. It's called Cities. And this book, nobody knows about this book. I'll bust out a copy of it at some point. But in the back of it, there's like 12 to 15 pages called Character Catch Up. And it is basically what your characters do in their downtime. and you can invest, you can get married, you can be arrested, you can join the military, you can become a government official, you can rip off a government official, and all of these have modifiers that you gain and lose and so forth. And then there's a table that says what it all resolves with. So we started using that, and we only ever do it together. My memory is for shit. So like I can't remember everybody's backstory. So I need the players to remember each other's backstories so I can just step
Sure.
out of that, you know? And so for me, like I've been doing that since like 1990. And
Sure.
we get out of 2 sessions and people know each other. They've met each other through this web of interactions, and they have relationships with each other already. And then we start, and we usually start at 3rd level just because I played first level so many times. I'm just over it. So my session zeros are usually 2 sessions long, lots of inter party, you know, this is probably phrasing, right, Brian? This is
Whatever you're doing.
whatever this is all the players coming together in session zero.
There's a lot of this.
There's a lot of this going on, but what results is the ability that people are always working on stuff.
Synergy. That's what that is. That's
That's
synergy.
synergy. Yeah,
Is that what that was?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. So
Looks like a couple people have seen have that cities book. So that's I'll have to go
Yeah,
look that one up.
it's just an old school book. It's black and white. It's printed on really crappy old paper, but it's just wonderful.
Very cool.
So if we all agree that the purpose of session zero, I guess we all can agree that the purpose of session zero is just to come to a common place, whether it's we're playing 4th edition, which that never happens, or we're playing like a genre like horror. Then like once you get past those types of decisions, what are other things that we need or that we typically share with our players? I mean, I guess theme, tone, character, house rules. I mean, what are things that people feel are really important to share right off the bat? Let's start with Jimmy.
Yeah, there'll be, so on the virtual side, sharing, we're talking about rule system or just game, the table in general,
The
because
tone
Like
of your
what-
game.
tone of the
Rules
game.
agnostic.
Yeah,
well,
what do you
okay.
like the very first thing when you sit down and start talking with people, like where does it start for you naturally? What do you say, hey, we're all gathered
Don't
tonight?
be afraid to ask a question or
Dearly beloved.
understand. Especially, yeah. Oh, man, God almighty.
Let's get we are gathered here.
Man, so yeah, for me it's always been I'm making sure that they're getting to understand what they're doing, having there's a fun with it, and not getting frustrated, because you're now playing a game, but you're also the virtual side too. So now you're juggling more than just being able to play the game. You've got the technical side, and I'm trying to make sure that they're especially the newbies, is who I will call them, those who are completely new to the system and game and all that. Yeah, that they make sure we're having fun, and question me if they don't understand why I ruled on something or don't like it. Call it out. I have no problem with that. And
Right.
Bye, Beth.
So
Bye,
let me,
Beth. Bye, Stephen.
we promised a deep dive, so I want to ask a deep dive question for Jimmy. Like when people do question things, not just in session zero, but anytime in your game, how much time do you allow for that, and how do you either resolve it or like just say we got to cut that off?
when they're questioning something that I've ruled on, or just
yeah. Let's say I mean, not to be a jerk, but sometimes I've seen people at tables go, under their breath, oh, that's bullshit. That's not in the rules.
Got several that will rule that way, or they'll go, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And
Wow.
so,
Well, and I think you could. I think you could do an entire episode on that alone. I mean, because you've had that happen a lot, where the GM is the arbiter, or is the GM there's a whole different thing you could talk about there.
Or the facilitator. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, there's sometimes where I'll just drop it and say, nope, that's the way it rules, because I'm reading it. I already know it's in front of me, or I'm going that direction, or I'll say, win me over, or roll it. Roll this deal and let's figure it out. Here's what's going to happen. Okay.
Right.
So,
and real quick, Jimmy, like just your 3 go-to game systems, like if what you would like to run, not what your players want, but like if you wanted to run something, what are the 3 things you love?
well, so there's always going to be the D&D side, but it's going to be, you guys are going to hate me. I am totally missed 4. So
Too late.
So thanks a
You're
lot.
dead to us.
Yeah, it did. I cut my teeth on Castle Crusades several years ago. That's what got me
that's
back
all right.
into
Yeah,
the RPG side. And like I said, if I could get the books and code it, I would do Earth Dawn. There's
Earth
no
Dawn.
doubt.
That's a shout out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bringing it back, baby.
Nice.
Circles, not levels, right?
That's
Right.
right. Yep.
Right.
Let's just add a bunch of crazy dice and get silly.
Loved it. And I love the way the progressions of the dice worked. I just thought that was smart.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, you mean the multiple fours, multiple
Yes,
sixes,
and how it
then
just
some
kinda
sixes and
progressed
some
out.
eights?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what about you, Brian? Like, what's your first club out of the bag for, like, we're sitting down talking about session zero. I want you all to know.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to go play style tone.
Okay.
Because you know what? Like, I know that everyone likes something different, right? But you're never going to catch me playing a My Little Pony game. All right. So I want to be very clear that there's very few unicorns and probably no rainbows in games that I run.
It's actually the reason Brian and I have never played together.
Because Matt only plays in games where unicorns are the primary player class.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, so my whole point is, like, I run a very dark, sinister, sometimes brutal game because that's what I love, right? But if I had 6 players who said, yeah, that's not really what we want, I would have to think to myself, well, maybe I should run a different campaign. Maybe I should run it a different way. Because although I want to have fun, I want my players to have fun.
Yeah, for sure. I think that that's another whole episode, right? Like, how dark is too dark, and what can, how far can you go? There's been a lot of talk on forums that I'm on lately about, like, violence, sexuality, things like that in the game, and that's just not something. I mean, I'm not prudish by any standard. I mean, but I do know that there are things that are legitimately, like, no-go areas, and I know what they are. But then
That's my take too.
I meet people sometimes, and I can see, and not dogging on them, I can see that they're genuinely okay with, like, lots of decapitations, and things like that, because probably video games have showed some of that stuff. So that's interesting.
So I just want to point out that I've actually played in some of Rob Schwab's games, Shadow of the Demon Lord, and in his session 0, which was about 30 seconds before he ran the game, he was like, on a scale of like 10 to 20, because there's no 1 to 10 in a Rob Schwab game, how much mayo, how much ogre nudity are you guys looking for?
Yeah. Just give me a rough idea, because I've got a lot of pictures back here that I can share.
So,
yeah. Okay. Well, what about you, Matt? Real quick though, I wanted to ask you this. What are your 3 favorite systems to run? Brian.
We have me?
oh,
Brian.
Oh, geez. Okay, so
Maybe not your favorites, just the ones you would do. Like, if you were going to run a game next weekend.
if I had to say I want to run 3 games right now, I'm going to run some World of Darkness, although I'm going to bastardize the rules because that is a game that's great on role-playing and terrible on combat. I'm going to run Savage Rifts because that is an amazing, amazing setting, also with terrible, terrible rules. And then I'm going to probably run some 5e D&D, just because that's your standard fantasy. That is your Bud Light of the D&D world. And you know what? People enjoy drinking it. So there.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. I think that
a terrible analogy.
I don't
Why do you
disagree.
guys have me on this show?
So Matt, what's the first thing you want to discuss in a session 0? What's your the main thing that's important to you to get across?
It's more like Pabst. Apparently, DM Fat Folks says it's more like Pabst.
Yeah, that's
Actually, yeah, I'm going to go with the guys in chat. So there was a couple of guys up there at the top that were saying the table rules are important, and especially in a group like Jimmy was talking about earlier, in a group that you don't know all the players, making sure that we're all on the same page with how the rules of the table, the homebrew rules, I hate that word, but the tabletop that session's rules are going to work. If you have something that's outside
systems,
alternate rules, the independent rules, if that's how that's going to work.
Independently published rules. Who are they published by? Me.
Yeah.
Right now, I just did it. It's on paper. But describing how that's going to work for everybody, I think that's a pretty critical part of session 0. Second to that, well, now that I think about it, it might be first. So if first establishing the theme, I think everybody said that so far. So establishing this is a horror themed game, so gird your loins. Second, because this is a horror themed game, now these are the house rules that are going to apply. We're going to have a horror stat or a sanity stat. There's no phrasing there. That was legit. No phrasing. Anyway, these are the rules that are going to apply because this is a horror session or whatever. The superheroes. These are the rules. Physics no longer applies because superheroes. And then finally, hey, these are the boundaries. Where's the left and right bounds? Who's uncomfortable with gratuitous violence? Who's uncomfortable with gratuitous sexual description? Which, for me, I couldn't care less. I don't delve into that at all.
So you know what?
Completely unnecessary.
Amazing topic. I think most people play role-playing games for power fantasies, not necessarily sexual fantasies.
Yeah.
Yes. They could convert. I think they converge sometimes, but yeah, I would agree.
For the most part, I am 100% okay with leaving that completely out of the games that I run, and I run very dark games.
Right. I say something to some of my players, not all of them heard me say this, but I say, we don't role play to the point where I care when you take a shit. And like, so therefore, like I just put a whole bunch of stuff into that outhouse. And I say, that's that door. When that door is closed, that door stays closed. And,
spell components are in that outhouse too in my games.
Right. Unless there's a really funny joke to be made about being trapped in an outhouse, being dragged downhill by an Odiug or something because he's looking for lunch. But either way, I think we all kind of have no-go areas. But I think that's probably an interesting topic for a future thing too.